Welcome everybody to our Wilson County Historical Society. This is our third Wednesday Museum After Hours, and our presentation tonight is on the Fredonia Canning Company, which was in existence for 2 growing seasons in 1890 and 1891. So tonight I'm going to tell you about maybe what caused it to start and be developed, and how successful it was, and then something about the demise of it. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Leanne Giffens. I'm a volunteer here at the museum, and I love doing the research. So this has just been a fascinating story for me to find, and there really is quite a lot of information from the Wilson County newspapers of that time. And they are available online. If any of you would like some help with how to use newspapers.com or how to access it, just stop by the museum or get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to share that resource with you, because I just love doing that. First, I want to show you a map so you kind of get a feel for what we're talking about, where this was. So this is a map that was the 1890 Sanborn map. They were developed as fire maps. The fire insurance companies developed these maps, and they indicated which buildings were where, and if they were made of brick or wood, and where the exits were, and all that stuff. But let's get some orientation here. So we see that the courthouse is right here. Notice the names of the streets are different. They were changed in 1902 for a reason that I have not determined. But Chase Street here is now Washington. Jackson is now Adams. Grant Street is Jefferson. Ohio Street is Madison. Market Street is Monroe. Sherman Street is Quincy. Going north and south, let's start here with First Street. Garfield became First Street. Nichols became 2nd Street. Let's see, that's Haddon became 3rd Street. West Mound Street became 4th. Julian 5th, and Main Street, of course, would be 6th, and on it goes. So when we orient ourselves for Washington on this map, here the railroad tracks are where some of them used to be. Here's 3rd Street, 3rd and Washington, so here's the Pete's, Pumpkin Pete's. Napa and the Co-op are right here. When we go to the old depot was in between here, right along here. The Alert business is right here between 1st and 2nd off of Jefferson. So you cross the tracks here that are still there. You come here, and now you get to across the former railroad tracks, and that is where the Canning Company, Fredonia Canning Factory, and the Ice House were. BW Meat Processing is right in this area that I'm pointing to. So the Canning building is no longer there, but the Ice House structure is there, and it is owned by a fireworks company. So that's the area we're talking about, right here in this area. This would be Salt Creek, and of course, West Park. Okay, the names of the street again changed in 1902. Take a good look at that. And now let's get started on why in the world this business came to be here in Wilson County. So we go back to 1889. And the first notice really of a cannery in the newspaper was in the Fredonia Democrat in April 12 of 1889, and it said, Fredonia wants a syrup factory, also soap, starch, and canning factories. About a month later, May 24 of 1889, in the Neodesha paper, it said, the fruit question. As this country grows older, it becomes more and more evident that the climate and soil are especially adapted to fruit raising. Finer strawberries never grew than those which have been placed on our market by home producers this season. We need cite no proof as to the apple crop since our record of the past 2 years. Blackberries, raspberries, gooseberries, and almost all other kinds of small fruits yield abundantly here and approach as near perfection as they do anywhere. And it goes on and on about other fruits that grow well in this area. Indeed, as we started out to say, our farmers should pay more attention to raising fruit and thus diversify our products still more. Let our people secure the erection of a canning and evaporating establishment here, and many farms that are not paying expenses under the present management will prove very remunerative. A diversification of products is one of the essentials for a prosperous community. My goodness, they knew this in 1889 and we know it today. By all means, let us develop the resources of our country still more. Much progress has been made in this direction, but let further advancement be made. So there was kind of a groundswell of sentiment that this would be a good idea. June 28 of 1889. In view of the splendid crop this year, it is a pity that we have not a canning factory to utilize it and give our farmers a better market. Then in November 1 of that year, Fredonia will have a first-class canning establishment in successful operation next season. It will be a good thing for both town and country and may prove the nucleus for more manufacturing industries. And I think we all understand that concept that success breeds success. And so that was the thinking at the time. November 22 of 1889. The growth of the canning industry in this state is a thing of the last 5 or 6 years. There are about a dozen establishments of importance in Kansas. The factory in Lawrence appears to be the most prosperous, the company having cleared $20,000 last season. This year, 3 million cans of fruit and vegetables were put up, employing about 750 persons in the field and factories several months. And that was from the Topeka Journal newspaper. So Fredonia was paying a little bit of attention to what was going on in the rest of the state and to understand that none of this would have happened without the railroad being here. There's no point in canning things if you don't have a way to get your goods to the market. So now we move ahead to January 24 of 1890. A meeting of the businessmen of the city was held in the county clerk's office Wednesday evening for the purpose of considering ways and means to secure the location of a canning factory at this point. Just about a week or 10 days later, in the Citizen, R.T. Race, that's his last name, R-A-C-E, who has gone east for a few days, will be back on Saturday. If then the amount necessary to the formation of a stock company is not made up, the effort to start a canning factory here, as well as their purpose of putting in an ice plant, will be dropped. Only $1,300 more is needed, and to us it seems too bad that there should be any question about raising it. For the prospects are that those factories would be run in a business-like manner and so prove a great blessing to the town. Real estate owners especially could make no better investment. Something to start our town in the right direction again is what is needed. Let us not lose a good chance. Moving ahead to February 21 of that year, R.T. Race has purchased Fredonia Electric Light System, and the power of that plant will be used to run the ice and canning factory. So we're starting to get the idea that those two will come in at the same time, the ice and the canning. February 21, the meeting called for last Saturday evening to consider Fredonia's manufacturing interests was well attended. A committee of 15 was appointed to raise the remaining $1,300 of the $6,000 proposed for a canning factory, a task which they have about accomplished. The canning and ice will now be built without a doubt. T. Race has gone after the machinery needed for the factories, and as soon as he returns, a company will be organized, and then the building will proceed under the directions of the superintendent. Moving ahead 7 days, R.T. Race will be back in the city in a few days, He has purchased the machinery for the factories, so there is no longer any question about having them. And farmers and others can make their plans accordingly. Building will begin as soon as Mr. Race comes back and a site is chosen. Orders for ice plants are so numerous that Mr. Race had an opportunity to sell his machine again at an advance of $5,000. Evidently, Mr. Race means business. Now, this is in February, and we know that people are anticipating the growing season and making plans. So this is no time to waste in getting your garden planted or certainly your plants planned for. February 28, it must have been a cold spell because this is the note in the Citizen. A few such days as yesterday and today would make an ice factory an unnecessary investment. March 7. A meeting for the organization of the Fredonia Canning Company will be held March 7 at 7:00 p.m. in the courtroom. Please attend. March 14. The Canning Factory. A meeting of the stockholders for the election of the board of directors was held last Friday night. The following were elected, and these last names some of you may recognize: Hudson Pierce, R.T. Race, A.S. Race, I think they were brothers, and M.T. Cantrell. On Saturday evening, another meeting was held for the purpose of preparing bylaws and rules for the directors' guidance. Since that time, they have been looking for a site with no definite results as yet. They want the site that offers the most advantages, said site according to the instructions of the stockholders, to be in or near the city limits. And then they go on to engage a superintendent for the making of arrangements with the farmers for materials and the canning of them. This man, they go on to talk about what his experience is. He has large experience in this field. They hope that business principles will prevail throughout, and a broad, energetic policy will be followed by all. This town should become one of the finest and most flourishing in this part of the state. Also noted on March 14, this was in the Neodesha Register. The Fredonia Canning Company have elected officers and prepared a charter, which has been sent to the Secretary of State for approval. So what was happening in Fredonia did get publicity in the broader area. Other towns were paying attention. Other towns were also developing or considering their own canning factories. They were seeing the opportunity as well. Now March 21, J.M. Fitch's Seed Store at Case and Hudson's, number 5, Opera Block, will be the distributing office for seeds to contract growers for the new canning factory here. Mr. Fitch having been awarded the contract of supplying the company with seeds needed. He has also secured a contract to grow and transplant 100,000 tomato plants for his company to furnish to growers whose tastes run to that delicious edible. It may be as well to add that the seed has been purchased from the old established and reliable Kansas Seed House in Lawrence. The amount of plants that they talk about, the amount of acres that are planted, are just astonishing to me. March 21, ground has been selected and active preparations being made toward building the canning factory. This is an institution that will be of great value to the farmers of that community. Then a week later, the City Council met Tuesday evening and passed an ordinance taking into the city the tract of land recently bought by the Fredonia Canning Company. So the land that they purchased was not at the time of purchase in the city limits, so they knew that that would be important to have that happen. Also on that date, this was an article in the Citizen, growing produce for Fredonia Cannery. First, an acre of corn, peas, beans, or tomatoes grown for the cannery amounts to from 3 to 8 times as much as an acre of common corn or field crops. Second, you contract and thereby have an absolute sale of your crops at the higher prices. Third, there is little or no risk in growing crops for canning as the crop is picked and marketed when green while generally field crops have to wait until matured, and it is the last end of the season that ruins the crop by winds and drought. Corn never fails to arrive at roasting ears, at which time it is picked. Fourth, the Fredonia Canning Company furnishes at cost all seeds so as to have uniform quality and wait for pay until crop is marketed. The company has $812,000 cash capital to pay for produce and will prepare to put in cans only that which they contract for in advance, and will pay cash on delivery for all produce contracted for. So this is not your backyard garden and bring in your tomatoes that might be different from your neighbor's tomatoes. This was all produce that was grown under contract with uniform seeds and uniform standards. So they were buying them the seeds locally. There's a notation about cutting off the water supply for a day while they are making connections for the canning factory and ice plant. Those are the sorts of things that are in the newspapers all the time. April 4, RT Race has deposited $2,000 in the banks of this city to the credit of the Fredonia Canning Company, the same being 1/3 of his subscription of $6,000 to the capital stock of the corporation. So this was a really busy time in making establishing contracts with farmers for planting corn, peas, tomatoes, beans, etc. in preparation for the growing season. Then in April 4, in the Neodesha Register, we see a notation of the real estate transfer. So we know who they bought the land from, and it was from J.R. Willits, 1 1/4 acre at a cost of $126.90. And if you remember J.R. Willits, we did a couple of months ago, we did a program on him, and he had Willits Opera House, and he was a doctor, so he owned this land on the west edge of town. April 11, the Canning Company has received 75 bushels of peas for seed in the past 2 weeks, having contracted for the planting of 75 acres. Can you imagine, those of you that are listening that have ever picked peas, 75 acres, really? I mean, many of us like to eat peas, but are not as crazy about picking them. The company has also contracted for the planting of 200 acres of early sweet corn and is preparing to take care of a large crop of tomatoes. The cannery enterprise is a dead sure go and will be a success if success is possible. Colonel R.T. Race, who is devoting much of his time, energy, and business genius to the interests of the cannery, will make it win if such consummation is attainable. Now, this is the only newspaper notation that I found that says Colonel R.T. Race, and I have attempted to do a little bit of research about him, find out some more information on where he came from, how long he was in town, and just have not been able to find out anything about him. So if there is someone that wants to drill down on that, I don't know what RT stands for. I've not seen anything about that. But his last name was Race, R-A-C-E, and this seemed to be his baby. May 2. 2 carloads of the ice plant machinery were unloaded yesterday, and the balance will arrive on Monday. Men are also here to put it in position. The canning factory building has been enclosed, and the roof will be completed today. So those 2 businesses were emerging at the same time. May 9, farmers and others who have planted vegetable crops under contracts with the Canning Company have fair prospects for favorable yields. The cannery promises to do a good business the first year. Then of May 9, we had a delegation of visitors from Chanute, and they list all these visitors. There were prominent people in the town of Chanute, councilman, attorney, several editors of several newspapers, and they came to they were met at the depot, Santa Fe Depot, by R.T. Race and several others, and they were driven all over the city. They went to the cannery, factory, the ice plant, the courthouse, the electric lights, the fire department came out and did a little demonstration. They went to the West Mound, and they just had this glowing report of Fredonia and what was happening here. May 16. Notice by Canning Company. All parties contracting with this company whose plants were killed by the frost this week can get free plants and seeds to replace the same at the cannery factory office. May 16, and they had frost. So kind of late. May 23, the electric light plant will be moved today from its present site and located at Raceville, Fredonia's western suburb, beside the ice plant and canning factory. That is the only time I've ever come across that area referred to as Raceville, and I would assume it was because of the gentleman's last name. That's interesting to call that area the western suburb. May 30, L.H. Porter is setting out several thousand tomato plants for cannery use. I wonder who is going to pick those tomatoes. May 30, the first canning by our new factory is expected to be done next Monday. Also May 30, have you been down to look at the new canning factory and the new electric lighthouse and the new ice factory? They are worth a visit. Also May 30, our new factories. Our new factories are almost completed now. The manufacture of ice will begin in about a week, while canning will begin next Monday. The buildings situated very conveniently by the railroad and also with relation to each other are well put up. They are good substantial buildings, while the machinery in each of them is the best made. The capacity of the ice factory is 10 ton a day, which by the building of another vat may at any time be doubled to 20 ton. The building is 40 feet by 80 feet. Now the museum has an image of the Fredonia Ice House that I want to share with you. This is the image that we have. And notice it is backwards. So I reverse the image and you can see now what it would look like from just across the railroad. This would be looking to the west. So we're standing on the east side of the tracks looking to the west. And a good portion of this building is still in existence and, as I said, is in use by the fireworks business. So the capacity of the canning factory is about as follows. Corn, 10,000 cans per day. Tomatoes, 15,000 to 20,000. Peas, 10,000 to 15,000. Of course, the amount put up depends upon the number of hands employed. This building measures 48 by 80. At the rear of the building, a receiving platform is yet to be built 20 feet wide, and beyond that, a husking shed. About 200 acres of corn, 100 of peas, 100 of tomatoes, and 10 of beans have been planted for the factory. Between the canning factory and the ice factory is the engine house. The engine furnishing the power for both factories as well as for the electric light. Next to the canning factory on the side opposite the engine room is the storeroom, which measures 48 by 60 feet and is 2 stories high. Altogether, we have reason to be proud of the factories, which under the good management they will receive, will be a great acquisition to Fredonia's business interests. So obviously, as this article describes that, the structures, a good portion of what they just described is no longer here, which is not surprising given the events that I'm going to talk about next. So they had a very successful summer. They canned 100 bushels of peas in one day. Again, I wonder who picked those. Another day they put up 200 bushels of peas. They paid, this is a note from July 4, they paid out wages to the employees for labor for that 1 week, $375. During the week, there were about 130 persons on the payroll comprising men, women, boys, and girls. So this obviously was a time before there were age limits for working. This is amusing to me. July 11, summer in Kansas. The note is, "It is about time the ice factory was started. Things need freezing up." But then July 18, the dry weather has cut the supplies of the canning factory a little short. The ice plant will probably commence operation about the 25th or 26th. So obviously, like anyone who grows things, the weather has a huge impact. July 25, peaches are scarce in the market at the stores. The cannery is gobbling up most of this fruit. August 8, they contracted with someone from Neodesha for the delivery of 1,000 bushels each of apples. And another person from Clifton Township sold the company several hundred bushels of apple. And this fruit would have been shipped in by rail. Also in August, the Canning Company is putting up 6,000 cans a day now, mostly corn and apples. Somebody from Neodesha Township passed by the citizen office this forenoon with 5 big wagon loads of apples bound for the cannery. By August 22, about 200 hands are employed at the canning factory this week, and still more are wanted. August 29, the canning factory is in full blast. The great trouble they have experienced so far is scarcity of hands. Their employees generally work by piecework, as a mechanic would say. They have also erected an evaporator with which to dispose of some of the fruit. They have quit purchasing apples until they dispose of the peach crop. They pay 40 cents per bushel for peaches and 30 to 40 cents for a bushel of apples. Let's see, by September, this is still 1890, and the reports in the newspaper continue to be glowing for the amount of produce that they process, what they're paying out, what they're bringing in. Last week, there was paid out to the large force of hands employed for wages alone, $929.09. The force numbered from 125 to 175 hands. September 12, it's a great advantage to the town by giving employment to so large a force and furnishing the farmers of the immediate vicinity a market for produce they would otherwise not raise or could not readily sell if they did. Through September, through October, continuing to can. October 10, the notation is that they shipped a carload of canned goods to Chicago. So they are having a wide market for this. But October 24, it says the canning factory is still running, but will probably shut down before long. And I would make an assumption that that is directly related to the growing season and the products that they have now come to the end of their ripening. November 21, they shipped another 5 carloads of canned goods to Chicago, so they didn't immediately sell everything they canned. They did have a storeroom. End of November, they're running a force of about 100 hands, having received a carload of apples from Chanute. So I think their workforce fluctuated depending on the fruits and vegetables that they had coming in. But this is interesting. December 12, the Fredonia Canning Company has ordered a carload of beans from St. Louis, which will be canned here, labeled Boston Baked Beans, prepared by Fredonia Canning Company and put on the market. January 9 of 1891, R.T. Race has been in Chicago, and he has now secured a government contract for canned apples at the highest price. February of 1891, party cooperation and support of farmers and gardeners, coupled with the same enterprise and industry that characterized the management last year, will enable the Fredonia Cannery to still further extend its splendid reputation during the season just dawning. February 27. The Canning Company will contract this season for 1,200 or more acres of vegetables. Wow. And now, in March, they have purchased the machinery to make the tin cans, because there was a time, I didn't mention this earlier, but there was a short period of time where they were out of cans, and so had to halt their production. So now they are starting to get into production of their own cans, so they won't have a shortage. Through the summer, continued to do well. Strawberries are mentioned as being really successful. They have placed what they call an evaporator or fruit drying apparatus to utilize the apple parings and the waste, and they send that to the eastern markets, where it's used largely by manufacturers of, quote, pure fruit jellies. So they're trying to use everything they can. August, they're working mainly on tomatoes, canning probably 150 bushels per day. These are shipped in from Sèvres and Neodeshe. By September 25, Clark's Oil Mill Company have quit buying flaxseed. The canning factory and ice plant have ceased to go. Quite lull in the enterprises of Fredonia, and we are afraid if the dry weather continues that the waterworks will fail. Then how blue we all will be. Friday, September 25, 1891. Notice of special call meeting. There will be a meeting of the stockholders of the Fredonia Canning Company at the office of Dr. J.K. Willits on September 29th. Business of importance to transact. Which makes me wonder, is this the beginning of the end here? Well, they are continuing to can apples through October. The last notation in October 23, the Fredonia Cannery is using up 200 bushels of apples per day. November 13, 20 days later, the cannery closed about 10 days ago. Well, again, it could be because of lack of product, could be a couple other things. November 13, the Canning Company shipped 3 cars of canned goods this week, so they still had stock that they were shipping out. November 20, they had 10 people employed at labeling this week. December 24, Christmas Eve, 1891. Race Brothers have made arrangements for some seed corn for planting and expect to plant a great amount of land to sweet corn. The canning factory is making preparations to do an immense business the coming season. However, just a month later in January, we see notice in the Wilson County Citizen of lawsuits filed against the Fredonia Canning Company. And there are many of these listed in the newspaper. I didn't copy all of those, but they had, I bet, at least a dozen different companies that obviously the Fredonia Canning Company had purchased things from that had not been paid for. May 13, so the first part of 1892 was all filled with these lawsuits. Some of them were continued, and finally they were starting to be settled. May 13, A.P. Hamilton took judgment for $1,800 by agreement against the races for lumber furnished for the canning factory and ice plant this week. So even the building was not paid for. June 10 of 1892, notice in the Alliance Herald, sheriff's sale. So now the Canning Company is the defendant, and they are selling on the west front door of the courthouse in the city of Fredonia on the 21st day of June. At public sale, they are selling the real estate. Buildings, machinery, and all the fixtures to go with it. July 7 in the newspaper, the Fredonia Canning Factory was sold by the sheriff last week, being bought by Charles Race of Burlington. The ice plant, sold at the same time, was bought by the Chicago firm that furnished the machinery. So it looks like maybe the Race family was able to work the deal to their benefit just a little bit, or recoup maybe some of their investment, maybe we should say. I would also note that it says the ice plant was sold at the same time, and we know that The ice plant continued in some form over time. We know as late as the 60s, the ice plant there was an ice plant in that location. That is kind of a story for another time. But in 1892, the ice plant was sold as well. There continued to be lawsuits. By July 29 of 1892, the large fruit evaporator was advertised for sale. And then June 16, 1893, so this is the following summer, the canning factory building was torn down this week. A Mr. Rucker of Stanton, Nebraska bought what machinery there was in the building. This was in the Alliance Herald. A canning factory building at Fredonia is being torn down, the venture having proved to be an unprofitable one. This is to be regretted, for such institutions are of great benefit to the farming communities in which they may be located when successfully operated. So we don't have a complete picture of why that business failed. We can make some guesses based on the fluctuations in the farming community and the weather. I don't really have enough information to say that it was poor management. Also, maybe don't have quite enough information to say that it was initially they didn't have enough capital really to build the buildings and didn't sell enough stock. But there you go, the story of the Fredonia Canning Company, 1890 and 1891. So thanks for participating with us by viewing it and sharing this story with other people. We look forward to a month from now for the museum, third Wednesday, Museum After Hours. And I think we'll be talking about the swimming pools. So join us for that. Good night.